Hello and welcome to the Permaculture Vine, episode 105. We're live today with Permaculture Canada and special guest Neal Hegarty from Craysoul Permaculture. We're going to be chatting PDCs today. Basically, what is a PDC, why do a PDC, the ins and outs, and our own experience. So we just want to do a quick round of just who you are, where you work, and where did you do your PDC? Can I start with you, Neal?
Yeah, I'm Irish, but I live in Guatemala. I've been here for 15 years, and I did my first PDC in IMAP, the Instituto Mesoamericano de Permaculture, the Mesoamerican Permaculture Institute, where I worked for several years. So I did my first PDC with them. It was kind of like part of my, I was like it was a helper on the course kind of thing, and then I got to be like an assistant facilitator for several more iterations. And then I teamed up and started teaching with Shad Goodsey, who you know a little bit, Cormac, from Anti-Plant Organics. And I taught numerous PDCs with him. So that was my kind of history with PDCs.
Great stuff, Lindsay.
Yeah, I'm Lindsay Brandon. I'm from Permaculture Canada. I'm here in Canada. I'm Canadian. I've lived east and west, so general Canadian. And I took my PDC with Verge Permaculture shortly after I was teaching, running a design team, and then also doing mentoring for the students through Verge. And then just teaching my own short courses all the time, doing lots of public speaking. That's really the content of my courses is public speaking instead of actually having like a format of a full course. But I'm in the process of creating an advanced designers course, which is quite daunting. So I'm really excited to talk to Neal about his experience in course creation and getting over the overwhelm. Over to you, Graham.
Graham Towerton. I'm an Australian in Michigan, and we've now covered, I think, the three most important British Commonwealth countries. I am in Adrian, Michigan, southeast part of Michigan, climate zone 6A in the United States. And I got my permaculture design certificate through Jeff Lawton's Discover Permaculture in 2021, and then started designing part-time in January of 2022, full-time in June of 2022, and I am now the Chief Operations Officer for Lindsay in Permaculture Canada.
So I got my PDC 2021 as well, I think, same year as you, Graham, was it? And then we started the same place together at the same time as well.
Yeah.
Just after graduating. So yeah, Jeff Lawton's online PDC. I took a couple of years to do mine. Shit happened. It just took me a while to get my final design on. And then, so I haven't actually taught anything on a PDC, but we do have short courses on our school, which we've started here. If you show the link there, we have an introduction to permaculture, and we have an introduction to design, very, very basic level, as in what tools you need, where they start. So basically starting with square foot gardening, just really, really the basics, and then introduction to design, which we talk about zones, very basic courses over there. Guys, thanks so very much for that. So what is a PDC? Who wants to take that one?
Permaculture design certification.
Yeah. 72 hours based on Bill Mollison's syllabus. And then I think it can be adjusted for your circumstances as well. So I think there's things like vegan, permaculture, of course. There's dry land, things that focus on dry land. There's in-person and there's online. Anybody else wants to what is a PDC?
Well, I think it depends on whether you want to define it according to a standard or not. And I guess this could be part of our conversation today is what should the standard be for a PDC? So I always go back to the source, the origin. Bill Mollison, David Holmgren, Jeff Lawton is one of their first students. Darren Doherty is one of their first students. And a PDC, according to them, should include the 14 modules and a full design exercise following the Permaculture Design Manual that was published by Bill Mollison. I think that's probably the closest to an official definition. I know that there was some debate that came out of one of the very first training schools that Bill and Jeff hosted, which, thanks to the wonders of technology, we can now watch on YouTube. Thankfully, they had the foresight to record their courses when they did them. And this is obviously before the internet existed, that they had the foresight to record this and then maybe thought that they would publish it at some point in the future. Well, so you can go back and watch those courses online. And it was actually Darren Doherty, as one of the first students of the first course, that actually asked the question, what do I have to do in order to go teach? And the answer was quite revealing. There's Bill Mollison and Jeff Lawton kind of looked at each other and said, go teach. And they said, if you've done the course, that qualifies you to teach. And I know since then there's been a lot of debate about whether you've got to get a diploma in order to go teach in addition to your PDC. I'm a purist and I'll follow the Jeff Lawton and Bill Mollison definition, as I got my PDC so I can go teach. But I do like to think that there should be some standards. And so when it comes to some PDCs that I've seen offered in the marketplace out there, I'm going to say that there's some people that meet our standard and some people that don't, in terms of what they're offering. I think there's confusion sometimes as to whether it's a permaculture course or a permaculture design certificate course as to what's being offered. And I'm all in favor of people offering as many different kinds of courses as they can that have permaculture as subject matter, just like you are, Neal, with the courses that you're offering, to the folks there in Guatemala City that you mentioned as who are coming on stream today. I think that's important that we do that, and I'll offer permaculture intro courses at my local nursery just to get people to understand what is permaculture. And I think there's a lot of room for a lot more like that. But I think a PDC should have a minimum set of standards so that when we represent ourselves as permaculture design consultants, we're all sitting on the same level playing field as that minimum standard. And that's what I've got to say about that.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me. Definitely down in Central America where I live, I would say permaculture courses, permaculture design courses have become almost like a mainstay of the economy of a lot of permaculture centers. I think Costa Rica have really sort of championed this model, right? Of you create a food forest and a teaching space, and then hosting courses and stroke retreats become the kind of lifeblood of the center. Mm-hmm. And I'm all for it, in a lot of ways. It's they become these kind of immersive experiences. What I noticed happening in a lot of the courses that I taught was people tend to put an emphasis on the experiential element over the actual theory of producing a high level design, right? And it was one thing I noticed. I worked with a lot of people over the years as a designer who had taken kind of these courses, and when we sort of went in, and I was like, okay, so you've done a course, so you've presumably done a sector analysis and you've mapped out your place and the topography, and you've kind of and they're I actually, the only thing I remember from the course is how to make a compost pile and and a banana circle, because what you find with people who are coming down to a place like Guatemala or Costa Rica, they want to get their hands dirty. They want to a lot of the people who take the courses they don't really have any intention of designing something. What they're most interested is in how do I plant a fruit tree? And they want to, they kind of want to see like a space transformed, right? Like, so they want to kind of like get together in a group and all muck in and kind of like transform an area and plant a food forest. But then a lot of the time, like, they go back to where they're from and they're like kind of scratching their head being like, would this work here? Like, and they completely lose the essence of like how to like plan out and design a site, really, which I think if you look at the original kind of curriculum, it was very much related to that, right? Like, there's a really kind of in-depth section on like design methodologies, you know, using the scale of permanence, layering a design in layers, water and access, vegetation, structures, etc., that I think a lot of the time just kind of gets like completely lost in the noise of a lot of these kind of PDCs that happen in places like this. And that's not, you know, they still, it's almost like their function has become just to like open people's eyes and give them this kind of like really immersive experience where they come out with a whole new kind of like story around what it is to be a human and, you know, our potential role on the planet. But in terms of like actually being able to approach a design, I that's something that I've seen as like, you know, a major shortfall. I don't know what you guys think about that.
It's a really interesting perspective to hear it from that angle, for sure. Up here in Canada, just from what I've been exposed to, it's been more focused on that. And me personally working with other designers, right, that are already professional designers, have this under their belt. So I don't have the exposure like you do to that sort of situation where it's a finite, you know, expression. And I can see how that can benefit people to get their hands dirty and get that three-dimensional experience. But I think, yeah, a great deal would be lost through not seeing permaculture as a holistic design perspective. For me, that's what the magic is. It's being able to walk into a piece of land and read the story and then start to see the relationships. Like, that's the weaving, it's in the unseen and all of that. So to take one component of it, I could see, you know, that as an add-on, right, to a PDC. It's like, get your PDC that has this holistic systems design. And then, you know, if there's something further you want to go into, like building houses and things like that, how that could be very beneficial. Because I felt like, well, for me, it was COVID, of course, when we had our training. So there was no interaction of any kind, you know, with Earth or even with other people except for online. So maybe that was lost, right? And I have that in me now where I'm really seeking to learn how to build, right? I want to learn how to build houses out of different forms and whatnot. So definitely benefits to both that I can see there.
Yeah, in the end, what you run up against is like the kind of time barrier, right? Of like, if you come down to a place like this for 2 weeks and people do want that kind of experiential, get their hands in the dirt sort of experience, and they don't want to be in a classroom for the whole time. But there is actually, if you're going to do a PDC properly, there is a lot of theory that needs to be gone through, I think. And I think that's one of maybe the challenges that I've kind of seen of like people taking them, being like incredibly initially inspired, but then like often going back to their places and then kind of getting almost like confused. Like, how do I actually apply this?
Yeah, I think Jeff's online one was very lecture intensive. There was like 72 hours of lectures alone. And then there was no practical side yet. There was, I was chatting to a couple today, record a podcast with them, and they said they wanted to learn how to plant fruit trees and plant the market garden, but then they got all this theory, and then they had to learn that stuff afterwards. And then I was thinking to myself, I always considered doing a second PDC, but I wouldn't want to sit through Jeff's 72 hours of lectures again. I would prefer to go and do an online, in-person PDC in Ireland. So then that sort of intensive sort of study and that theory is not really going to be covered in a 2-week PDC, because by the time you get out and about, like you're not going to cover that.
Well, I think let's remember where the PDC started, and again, going back to Bill and Jeff and David when they were teaching them prior to the internet's existence. It was just like what you're describing, Neal, that you're having where you are right now. It's people who are going to Bill's place or David's place or Jeff's place once he purchased it. And they would go sit in the lecture room for a little bit and learn maybe 30, 45 minutes of, theory. And then they'd walk outdoors and go do it.
Right.
And, there wasn't, any, presentations on PowerPoint or anything like that. You'll see Jeff Lawton's still using the same technique that he always did, is using a blackboard, for most of the stuff that he does, because that's what he started with and that's what he's good at. And so a lot of people in the Australian PDCs, when they were first started, we're talking back in the 80s, they were getting a lot more of the experiential hands-on aspects of permaculture than they were the theoretical parts of it. And the vast majority of people who attended those courses were just looking to take the experience that they gained from that and take it back to their own property and apply it on their own property. They weren't necessarily looking to become permaculture design consultants and do design work and consulting for other people other than for themselves. And so you see the evolution then of what's happened with technology. Obviously, the creation of the internet changed things in terms of the transmission of permaculture information dramatically. And then, Lindsay, you mentioned COVID. I don't know that there were a lot of courses that you could do online for permaculture prior to COVID. I mean, Jeff made it very clear. He put his online because he had no choice. People couldn't fly in and out of Australia to go do it in person with him. And that's turned out to be a good business decision from him, from the perspective that he's now got 1,400 or 1,500 people every year signing up for his course online at $1,500 a person. It's a multi-million-dollar business opportunity for him that he's captured. I think people are now looking at that as the model to copy, and maybe not looking at, okay, where was the source of this in the first place? The experiential aspects were what people wanted. Now, I will say there's a need for both. If I go back through my own experience, I learned about permaculture reading in these magazines that, Bill and Jeff and everybody were publishing articles in, and we just started to take what they had written and try to apply it on our property. Well, we didn't have the theory behind any of it. We just had articles that we could read and say, try this. And so after having 30 plus years of experiential aspects of permaculture under my belt, and I did my PDC for the first time in 2021, and I go, crap, here's all the stuff I've been missing out on in terms of all the theory and why it's important. And that became even more recognizable from the perspective of being in a very, very different climate here in Michigan than what I was in Australia. So once you've got the theory, then you're kind of able to cover all bases. So Jeff can go to the extreme arid parts of the Jordanian desert and do permaculture there. I can do it here in Michigan where it gets down to minus 25 Fahrenheit in the middle of February. Lindsay, you can do it in Canada where it gets even colder. And Neal, you can obviously do it in the tropics, which I think where permaculture was really designed for. It's the sweet spot, I think, for permaculture is subtropic to tropics. So I think there's room for both types of courses, and you could call them PDCs if you want to, if you're covering the theory as part of the experiential aspect of it. But I think both are important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think ultimately people, for me, the best way to learn it is to get to grips with the theory and the principles. I actually think sometimes people, I've seen this, people love the sound of their own voice. All teachers fall into that trap, and there's sometimes a temptation, I think, for teachers to overly complicate this thing, and in reality, a lot of the processes in permaculture are really quite simple if you kind of break them down, right? And where the learning really comes in is like where people get like a fundamental understanding of the principles and then apply them as soon as possible to like a real world, real life situation. And like in reality, you could spend years trying to like, learn all the theory, and if you're not applying it, you're not really going to get anywhere. And what actually, like in practice, what happens is the people who become effective, they take it and they start applying it in the setting and the situation they're in, and they specialize in that, like in that area, not just in that climate, but also in like in a specific application within that climate. Like you can be a permaculture designer in Canada, it's like great, like big temperature swings, but are you doing like rotational grazing systems and silvopasture for big farmers, or are you doing like, homesteads and food forests on small land, like, so I think a lot of it, and a lot of where I see the movement like needing to go is actually in people specializing in like,
Yep.
That's probably a fair comment from the perspective that once upon a time, and I think still today, there's not enough permaculture certified people to meet all the potential needs for folks who might want permaculture installed. So we're still yet to go up the growth curve properly in terms of the number of qualified people, that can practice permaculture. And so that opportunity for specialization, I don't think we're quite there yet. I mean, I agree with you, Neal, from the perspective that I should specialize in my area for Michigan, and perhaps within that certain skill sets that I should specialize in related to my location and climate. But on the whole, I think everybody's had to generalize to start with, from the perspective that you've got to try to meet all the possible needs out there for folks who might come to you with questions. And looking at the framework of where Lindsay and Cormac and I have all worked together with the design firm that we're all part of, we're literally contending with people coming from all over the world for design work.
Right.
And not necessarily having a skill set to design in southern France. You'd have to do the research if you were the designer chosen to do that work.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm actually really curious to hear where Lindsay is going in terms of her kind of like advanced courses. But I think I want to come back to what you were talking about there, Graham, in a little bit.
All right. Well, for the sake of time, we need to move on. But let's take it back to a beginner, or not necessarily a beginner, someone who might be experienced. Why would someone take a PDC? And what would you encourage them to do that? I know there's some people, designers who are working who don't have a PDC. So like basically, do you need one? And why would you do one? Anyone might take that?
I would say that, yeah, sure. Like people are taking their PDCs for different reasons. Some of them are just taking them to design their own places. I think that also ultimately guides their choice in where and who they get their PDC from. But not, I'd say that maybe it was like a 25% margin of people that actually wanted to pursue that professionally and just wanted this as additional knowledge for themselves, or to be able to do a community project, or to be able to design their own land. But for the most part, people weren't looking for it as a profession. And if they were, then that's when I say, then you really want to make sure that the basis of your education is going to cover the points so that you feel confident as a professional out there.
Yeah, I would say, like in an ideal world, everybody should take a permaculture design course. And I actually think that's kind of contained in the original idea of it, right? It's like you ideally, doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, business owners would all take permaculture design courses, because it's a fantastic way of, I think, first and foremost, just gaining like a kind of what I call like ecological literacy. Like most of the world are just completely ecologically illiterate. Like they have things that are sort of like common sense to anyone who's taken a PDC or worked in permaculture around sort of like water harvesting or, you know, biological storages of water, recycling of nutrients, you know, stacking functions. There's a whole load of principles contained in a PDC that can be applied to just about anything, because it's a question I get asked a lot, right? Like, what is permaculture really, if you break it down? And to me, it's ecosystem design, right? So it's like, no matter what you're doing in your life, if you can understand how nature works on a kind of a fundamental level and understand sort of the patterning language of nature, that's going to benefit you in like almost everything you do. So there, I think there's a real, sometimes there's this kind of like, oh, but I don't have land and I don't want to be a designer, so I shouldn't take a PDC. It's like, if you've got 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks and you're looking for like a unique, potentially life-changing experience, take a PDC. You're not going to regret it, right? Like they cost between like $1,500 and $3,000. I mean, you can spend that on a freaking yoga retreat. Like, so I think they're, like I say, I think it's something that like ideally everybody would be doing. I would like to see them become part of secondary school education programs. You know, I definitely think anybody who is working in like architecture, engineering, like anything like that, should just take it just to sort of like broaden their horizons. But really, I think anyone, and yeah, so I think that would be my kind of like 2 cents on like, you know, who should take them? Anyone, you know, because there's so many potentially useful kind of avenues that you can go with them. And also, like, one of the things I always say is like, human creativity is like such an untapped natural resource, and they're also just a fantastic way of like enhancing our creativity. So I think anyone should take them. Certainly then, if you're like a homeowner and you're looking to like empower yourself, be able to grow more food, then definitely. And then if you're in that kind of like smaller subset of people who are looking for a more exciting, you know, career and way of life, then absolutely you should take one. But I think it's for that subset of people that maybe being a bit more judicious about the course you take and who you study with is probably more important.
I'd like to add to the categories of people who should definitely do one. And just going back to, again, the experience I had with my parents, you know, they were first-time small crop farmers. So anyone who's in agriculture, you know, of any fashion of agriculture, should definitely do one, because there's so many things that can be learned from the theory that will make you better, even as a conventional farmer. If you never go organic, or if you never plant a perennial crop, you know, you'll get better at being a annual small crop farmer just by designing your property so that you don't have soil erosion running through your fields. You know, good water management techniques, you know, adapting your property for climate, you know, depending on where you're at the top of the hill or on the north slope, you know, when your sun's on the south slope, that kind of stuff. So I definitely recommend anyone in agriculture, whether they're in annual crops, perennial crops, orchards, you know, corn, soybeans, and wheat on rotation, get a permaculture course, because it'll open your eyes to things that you can do differently, and perhaps that'll improve your ability to make a better income out of your property. And that's the reason that my parents did it. You know, they didn't do PDCs. We couldn't afford that at the time. We were trying to figure out how to make money on a farm that wasn't. And part of it was that we were trying to grow zucchini and peppers and cantaloupes and beans and trying to send those off to the wholesale market, 5 acres at a time. and we couldn't do it. So we started looking at what could we put in the ground that was going to be perennial. So we started looking at citrus and avocados and custard apples and all those types of things that we could plant. And we started planting those things and recognized that there are better opportunities with those than we'd get out of the annual crops.
Great stuff. So different types of PDC. So mine was online. I would like to do an in-person one if I got 2 weeks. Maybe in 10 years when the kids are all up. Or maybe I take the whole family and get them all to do a PDC, which might be a better experience. Anybody want to answer that one? Types of PDCs? Mixed, hybrid? Graham, do you want to take that one? Yeah, Neil, go ahead.
Well, I could mention the one that that we're doing at the end of October with Adrian in an Earth Speed. If anyone's following this guy on former Hollywood actor Adrian Grenier, who kind of like found God, got out of Hollywood and the Playboy lifestyle, got married, bought a ranch, and is endeavoring to turn it into a kind of a regenerative community, basically. But I've been working with Adrian. Adrian actually took the first ever online PDC that I taught on, and that was also during COVID. So he took that kind of like very generalized, theory heavy permaculture design course, and he came up with a design for his ranch based on that. And as anyone who's done any design work knows, it's like generally you kind of come up with your first general concept, then you start doing stuff, and then you start seeing well, this works, and that's fucking way more work than I thought it was going to be, and and then one of my students for the online permaculture incubator that we have, one of my students went and redesigned Adrian's place as his kind of portfolio piece for the program that we have. And last May, we basically hosted a kind of permaculture boot camp on his land, and we implemented part of that design. We kind of like planted a syntropic food forest in Austin, Texas. We did swales, did a lot of mulching, and really it's working delightfully, basically, from what I've seen. And that kind of inspired him. He just loved having people come to his land. Me and him and all the people who came, like, we spent most of the course actually working, right? And people loved it. But not surprisingly, it was like, we'd love to have done more of the kind of design stuff that you do. And so me and Adrian got to talking in the kind of aftermath of that course, and we were like, we should turn this experience into a full PDC. And he was like, I really love this kind of syntropic food forest that we did, but I'm interested in doing more earthworks. He's in an interesting situation in that he's in Austin, Texas. He has 2 spring-fed ponds down at the bottom of his land. And Austin is just like, it's bone dry. So that land desperately needs earthworks and hydration. So, we could come up with a design for this place where we do more swales and ponds, and we kind of future-proof the land so that we can, once the trees are beyond a certain point, we can like rotate animals around it. He has like he keeps a small number of ducks and chickens at the moment, but I was like, we could easily like incorporate animals into the understory here, and then he has another area that he wants to turn into more like a market garden. So it's kind of like conceptually designed, but now we're very much getting into like the details of that design. And so what we decided to come up with was a kind of hybrid model where people who join that course, starting in like 10 days from now, we're going to launch that program, and we're going to meet up once a week, and we're going to do design sessions on his land, right? Before those design sessions, I'm going to send everybody like the theory behind what we're going to be doing. So In other words, like week 1, we're going to review our site analysis. So I'm going to send a bunch of people the lectures that we already have on our website on how to do a professional site analysis, and then we're going to meet and we're going to like discuss the topography, the aspect, the slope, all of those kinds of things. And we're going to start with our kind of like what I generally do, which is like a sort of open air brainstorming session. No bad ideas, just like everybody get your ideas out and like let's sort of like start sorting through them. And then as we go through it, we're going to layer the design as I would always do for my clients. So we're going to do our water and access layer first. Then we're going to do our vegetation layer. Then we're going to do our like structures and subdivisions. So that'll be like how best to like incorporate the animals into the thing. And we're going to basically produce over those meetings like a professional quality design for his space. And then we're all going to get together at the end of October for 5 days, and we're going to have like a sort of a work party. So we're going to implement as much of the design as we can get done in those 5 days. And then he's going to bring in a bunch of guest speakers, people who, you know, are doing grazing operations, beekeeping, managing nurseries, to sort of share their experience in a kind of like climate and context specific way. So that's the way we've decided to structure that PDC, and I'm very excited to see how it goes. I have a different type of educational program that we manage. It's, I guess, tangential in a sense to this, but where I really focus on is design, working with people who want to become professional designers. And so a lot of the work I do is I have I have my already recorded self-paced PDC, but I really focus in my education on making stuff as simple as possible. A lot of my thing is like, this stuff really has been trialed fastidiously over the last 30 or 40 years, proven to work in just about every climate and context. So I kind of focus more on getting people into process and understanding the kind of key principles and then applying them to creating their first portfolio piece. But then a lot of the work that I do with the people in that container is actually on business coaching. Because my big kind of realization, it kind of goes back to Graham's point, is that I think this is one of the fastest growing markets in the world, right? Like the need is just really extreme. Farmers are suffering, landowners are suffering, families are suffering. There's a growing awareness of the ecological crisis. There's a growing awareness of how hard it is to get, like, you know, fresh, good quality organic food. And there are actually a lot of people who've kind of maybe taken PDCs or at least permaculture courses. They're like skilled homesteaders, and they have no idea how to take those gifts and actually bring them to the world in a way where they can make a good living from it. And so the big kind of turning point in my career was realizing that, like, there's just best practices in business, and unless, no matter how good you are at permaculture design and growing food, unless you kind of know and understand those best business practices, you're not going to be able to thrive. And then if you're not thriving, you're not really going to be able to show up and serve your clients in the best way. So a lot of what I focus on in the community that we've created is how to actually get a real business off the ground that can, like, I think, create communities all over the regenerative communities all over the planet. So those are the kind of two educational models that I'm kind of most passionate about, I guess.
Anybody
Yeah, I
else?
love what you're up to. I love what you're up to with that live on, like, designing on site with people and throwing out those ideas, because really, like, when creativity happens, right, it's coming through us as people.
Exactly.
So I love that you're combining the efforts of everybody that's taking part, to, because then they're actively learning how to read the land, like they're practicing the skill. And I think that's really important. So I love to hear the aspect of what you're doing, and I'd love to know how you were designing, but we could take that offline in terms of like the softwares and the iPads and things like that you're using to interface between your base map and all and that. So the course that I'm creating, I'm building it online, but there's a big part of me that craves that interaction with people, right? So here I am building this course. I've been building it for a few years now, and I see it as beneficial to permaculture designers specifically. It is for those that want to take it into the career level. It's about being able to communicate your ideas to either your client or even documenting sites that are already done, like botanical gardens for educational purposes. So being able to come up with a design that's rendered in a professional way to either install it, find funding, all of that, right? Look for business investment. That's my focus. And that's my area of excellence, is creating digitally rendered designs and creating the scope of project and teaching people, step A, B, and C, and here's your plant list, and then creating that communication between the installation team and the designer. So I have a lot of experience with, creating the SOPs and creating the stages at which you have to do this, when you're working one-on-one with an individual, how what it looks like, what all those consultations look like, what are the questions that need to be asked. So that's really what my course is focusing on, is a little bit of that business aspect. Like you say, we've hit up a lot of different situations with a lot of different people, and we've come at it from many different angles in terms of how we work with people to understand what their vision is, for one, to create that connection between what the land also dictates, between what the vision is, and then, how do we get that design in the ground as well. So for me, I would like to take my course to other PDC providers, right? So the PDC is already there, and there's PDCs all day long, all over the place. And we're asked ourselves to create our own, and I'm sure we will. But I would like to be able to have the advanced designers course, the digitally rendering aspect, available for other PDC providers, and then be able to travel and see how they're doing things, right? Like come down to Ecuador and see what you're doing, and provide that as an extension to your current PDC, as an option for people that are already in the PDC. So if they want to take the advanced designers course and take it to that next level, then after the PDC is done, we can take it from there. So it's more, what I'm creating is more of an addition onto the people already are required to have the knowledge of having the PDC certification in order to take this course. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that sounds like a really beautiful offering. I can already think of a bunch of things that we could kind of like collaborate and work on, Lindsay. So that's really cool.
I'm fully with you on the business training aspects as well, Neal. So the other aspect that I cover is the installation part, the landscaping part of permaculture, physically putting everything in the ground. So Lindsay and I collaborated on a number of different projects over the last 12 months, where she's been the designer, for customers that I found here in my local area. And while I'm trying to manage my farm, I don't really want to spend time sitting behind a desk. And Lindsay is by far the better designer out of the two of us. So I always give her the opportunity to prove that point again and again and again. And she does. And then I get to be the person that goes out and puts the quotes together to give to the customers. And I often find that there's quite a number of permaculture professionals who've never been installers and want to become installers for the first time. And like you said, they don't have the first part of like, how do I put a quote together, or what do I need to have to run my business successfully in terms of like liability insurance? What tools and equipment do I need to have so that I've got a good kit to go to a customer and be prepared? And unfortunately, we've experienced folks that have started out with good intentions of being permaculture landscapers and didn't realize that they needed to have all this equipment themselves, thought maybe they could borrow it from their customers, some that didn't have vehicles to get to the site, that kind of stuff. That's a real problem, if you're trying to do work over a broad area. And so there's a room, a niche, call it, for business training for folks who are landscape installers, whether it's taking somebody who's already in landscaping and helping them to convert into permaculture landscaping, or whether it's somebody who's a permaculturist and wants to do the landscaping for the first time. But I've had, no formal courses that I put together on this, but I've had a lot of informal training that I've provided to installers to help them get over those first humps. What are they going to do to start up their business?
Yeah, and I think that's, to me, in terms of like the permaculture movement, this seems like a really important kind of next hurdle, right? One thing I think is, in the early years, I think permaculture was all about like training generalists, right? Like just learn how to build, learn how to grow food, learn how to landscape, learn how to do animal husbandry, be able to do a little sketch and a design. And I think now what we're seeing is it's going more and more in the direction of specialization. And personally, I welcome that, right? Because if it doesn't go in that direction, then it just stays as this kind of like, oh, the only people who do this are kind of like these rustic homesteaders who grow their own food and bring their eggs and their zucchinis to market on a Sunday, whereas in reality, the market is demanding much more than that now. And one of the things that's jumped out to me is like the importance of thinking in terms of like designing human ecosystems, kind of like you guys are doing, right? Like where Lindsay is specializing in the designing and the rendering. Graham, you're focusing on the like actual physical implementation, and like, because when you do that, then everyone can really excel in their lane. And it, as long as you can set up those kind of like symbiotic interactions, and it's something Cormac always talks about like this kind of cooperation over competition kind of model, right? Like I think that's huge. And yeah, like I think Graham, you're touching on something that's like, I had no guidance. So when I doing designs for people, I had no idea really of the value that I was providing in the design process. So I kind of like skipped over it and went straight into implementation. And I did so basically following the contractor model, because that was the only thing I knew and understood. But the problem with that is you end up like completely responsible for everything. And if you're a creative designer, which is what I am really, you end up totally outside of your zone of genius, right? Like, so, I'm a 10 out of 10 at like doing the design and the visioning and working with the client to come up with that. When it comes to like managing people, I hate that, right? Like that's not what I really, not where I excel at all, but I ended up doing tons of that and tons of logistics and budgeting and stuff that I was like actually kind of pretty horrible at, and then as I kind of like started to take a step back and invite in mentors, that was a big thing that I started doing. It was just like, like building up like what Tim Ferriss calls like a tribe of mentors is kind of like what I slowly kind of built around myself, of like business coaches and people who were excelling in areas that I was deficient in. And I started to piece together and realize like, hang on, there's a whole other way of doing this, right? Like, and so it's really interesting and inspiring to see how you guys are kind of like developing this like collaborative model and approach. I'm curious, say in your own business in Canada, where are the, where are you kind of, where are the shortfalls?
I'm not really seeing the shortfalls as much as I'm seeing the asks that are like surprising for me. This like community development, right? Business planning and community development. So I guess the shortfalls would be, if I have to come up with one, it's the the smaller scale food forest client that thinks that maybe I should be doing my job for free. So I ran into that a lot when I started Permaculture Canada up here in Canada. People looking at my prices going like, whoa, can't pay that. And it's like, well, this is a fraction of the cost of what it's going to cost you to put the design in the ground. So, that's where my biggest shortfall was in the beginning. And so it really actually, it's kind of just naturally changed the course of how I'm doing business with Permaculture Canada in Canada and what's being asked of me, right? So our main projects right now are large scale community development projects, intentional communities, investments, creating pitch decks and business plans for people to have an investment model to fund their intentional community project, that sort of thing, help people look for land and assess land that would be good for their community project.
And unlock funding.
Yeah, and they have funding. Yeah.
I think that's a huge piece. If you can take clients all the way up to like, once this plan is together, we know how to get funding for it for you to be able to make it happen. Like that's a huge value add, right?
Yeah, and I saw that with your chicken example as a good way to, start. And here it's B&B rentals, right? Get the glamping business going, get some income going right away. But yeah,
guys, I'm going to have to drag you back on topic here. We're here to talk about PDCs. That's a whole other podcast there. So,
all right. Well, let me jump back to the example with Adrian Cormac, right? So, what's different, I think, about that is we're focusing on designing the area first, and then the immersive element is on implementing the design that people will actually do. So we made a conscious decision to flip the kind of tortilla, as it were, and basically do the design first and then the implementation second. And so the hope there is that by doing that, people get the best of both worlds. They get to take part in the creation of a really high quality design, and then they get the immersive community experience, but they actually get to implement what they helped to co-create. So and they also then get like hours of support material on theory that they can go through in their own time, so that we don't have to like get everyone together for 3 weeks. Because that was the other kind of barrier that I saw with a lot of PDCs. It's like, people do want the immersive experience, but I don't think it's but they don't necessarily want to take like 2 or 3 weeks off work, right? So we're trying to like kind of solve all those problems in the most creative way that we can.
I think it's why the online course was so good for me. I mean, I had always wanted to do my permaculture training in Australia, but then found myself living on the west side of the Pacific Ocean instead of the east side, depending on your perspective. And so, I had budgeted to travel to Australia to do the PDC, go do the 2-4 weeks, and then realized when I came to America that I couldn't get 2 weeks of vacation until I'd actually worked for 10 years for somebody. So that was hard. Then there was the cost of traveling back to Australia. It was like anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 for the airfare. My wife and my 6 kids all decided that they would want to come with me for that trip. So now we're talking about $25,000 or $30,000 worth of travel and accommodation costs for us all to be there. And then there's the cost of the PDC itself. So I was looking at dropping, $30,000 to $40,000 to do a PDC in Australia. I'm like, when am I going to have that money and that time? So, COVID, the silver lining of that cloud for me was the fact that Jeff Lawton went online. And at that time, it was one of the first ones he'd done. And so it was $1,400 and it was self-paced over 6 months. I'm like, how could it get any better? So I was still working as an engineer. It took me about 30 seconds to sign up to say, yeah, I'll spend this money because I was going to save so much compared to traveling to Australia. Then while I'm traveling as an engineer, stuck in hotels during COVID, I'm sitting down and I'm doing my binge watching of the modules as they got published every week and doing the exercises, and I got through it pretty quickly. And so then the circumstances followed. Cormac, as you'll recall, we got invited by one of our colleagues to then join that design firm. You know, one of the TAs for Jeff's course was the one who invited us to join the design firm that we ended up joining. So for me, it was a great way to A, get the course done, something I'd wanted to do for over 20 years and never found the money and time to do it. B, it introduced me to my second career. So after doing 6 months of part-time design work, I was able to then make an economic decision to say, yeah, if I do enough designs every year, I can make this into something that pays my bills. And so I quit my engineering job. And not to put too fine a point on it, but permaculture doesn't pay as well as engineering. But I was able to make it pay enough that I could get by. And so then I got invited to do installation work, and that made it a lot easier for me to get by. And I'm spending all my time outdoors. What could be wrong with this? So I think there's room, for online courses, for in-person courses, whether they follow the 14 modules or not. That experiential aspect of building an earth oven for making pizzas is just as valuable as learning how to design in a Zone 6A climate in Michigan. So I think all of the above is what we've got to have.
Yeah. So I think the next one was choosing the right PDC. I think we talked about it. I think you answered that, Graham, well. It basically, you done the PDC that suited you and suited your personal circumstances. For me, it was the same. I had it originally, I don't know if you know it, Neil. There's a PDC down in Wexford that I had originally, Susie Can's place. I had originally registered for PDC there. The wife bought it for me, and that was in the August. And then it was like when I came to go, young children, I was like, there's no way I can leave them for 2 weeks. I think the youngest was like 4 at the time. I had 4, 3. I was like, right, there's no way I can go for 2 weeks camping down to Wexford. So then I ended up doing the online one, so it suited me. I think you touched on it earlier, Lindsay and Neil, as well, about doing what suits. And so pitfalls of selecting a PDC. What to avoid? Fundamentalists of any variety.
Avoid fundamentalists. Unless you yourself are a fundamentalist.
True. Have anybody got any scare stories they've heard from PDCs?
Not stories, but just the caution to choose wisely. I mean, I had my preference, obviously, which is why I picked what I did. Because Jeff was in Australia. He lived 25 miles away from where I used to live growing up in Australia. So to me, it was just logical to do his. But, when I get over here and I start looking at what I have to do to design for, climate zones 3 through 7, which is covered, most of North America, most of what I learned from Jeff doesn't help me, frankly, other than the pure theory of permaculture design, which tells you to look for the information that you need. So from my perspective, do some shopping before you pick your course, because you might find in your area there's somebody, again, that specialization within the Midwest, here in the United States, or there's a specialist in tropical Central America that's running a course that's most appropriate for the person where they live.
Yep. Neil, you were saying something there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think Graham nailed it there. Being very clear about, what your intention is, and then matching the sort of course to that. Like, if you want to become a professional designer and, make money, take my course. If you're looking for an immersive experience and like something that you'll never forget, and you want to get out and visit a totally new place in the world, come to Guatemala and take our in-person course. Or go to, and if you're looking for something like you own a farm in Northern Canada and you do a course with a farmer in Northern Canada, so I think matching it to your intention is kind of key, and being kind of clear on that and what your intentions are, and shopping around. Like, personally, if I was to take any course now, I would want to like get on the phone and do a call with the person who was like leading the course, and like be like, what's this person's vibe? So I think that's also a really good idea. Like, book a call, chat to the person beforehand, suss them out, see what they're offering, see what the deliverables are, the promises are,
Yeah. And as well, if you are struggling and you don't know, pop over to our school and put it in the comments. We'll be able to answer it for you as well. So we have a community over there around the podcast. There's designers on there. Just ask the advice. Somebody will know as you state where you're positioned at and what you're at, and somebody will be able to point you in the right direction as well. Neal, do you just want to go through your course? Just give us more details about your course now, where people can they book in? Do they want to chat with you first, or?
Actually, to take that course, you have to chat to me first.
Yep.
There's a limited number of spots available, and we do actually want to vet people who are coming in. So anybody who's interested in taking that course, I would say follow us on Creasol Permaculture on Instagram or Facebook, and just drop me a line, and we can set up a call and see if you're a good fit for that course. Is how we're doing that. Yeah.
And just make sure.
But the course itself is the physical part of that course starts on the 21st of October. So that's when we're going to all get together on Adrian's ranch. Last time we did it was a blast. We had a really fun dance party at the end of it. So if you are looking for that kind of mix of, I think, a lot of theory and applied theory combined with like sort of hands-on practical work, I'm really looking forward to that course. I think it's going to be a really great one.
Great stuff. Just make sure you say that you heard him on the Permaculture Vine as well when you're talking to him.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a discount if you say that.
I didn't know about that, but thanks, Neal. That's great. Any final thoughts or anything we haven't covered on PDCs?
Well, you could look at the Permaculture Institute in North America as well. That's a pretty long-standing organization where there are, professional PDC consultants that are doing this for a living. So that's another resource for people to go take a look at as well. They have an online community. So there's a lot of people there on one of their platforms where you can just discuss, where you are and maybe meet people that are in your area and get connected to resources that are close to you.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100% support on that one. Having been a former board of directors member for one of Pinus Hubs, Great Rivers and Lakes Permaculture Institute, strongly recommend that you get onto the Permaculture Crossing, which is that platform that Lindsay mentioned, because there are a lot of really good regional hubs that have been established under PINA where people are then focused on what's going on in their bioregions and geographic regions.
I think that's about us finished now. Do you want to just go around the horn again? Just final thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up where people can find these. Graham?
Yep, Graham Towerton, Adrian, Michigan. You can find me through Permaculture Canada or Permaculture Adventures of Michigan, permacultureadventuresmi.com.
Lindsay?
Yeah, Lindsay Brandon from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Armagarden and Permaculture Canada. You can find me online through Linktree, and there's a ton of videos and podcasts and all sorts of fun things to look at.
And I'm Neal Hegarty, Creasol Permaculture, and you can find us there on Instagram, and you can also come down and visit us in Guatemala if you're looking for an escape from the winter up north. We have a beautiful farm to table restaurant community here. We have really affordable internship, so people can come and basically work on our farm part-time and then accompany me and my partner Jeremy on our design projects. So that's a really fun way to spend a couple of months if you're a permaculture enthusiast. You can basically live here, live off the land, and get that kind of mixture of, you know, digging in the dirt and seeing what it takes to manage a farm like this, and also sort of shadowing me and Jeremy. We've got a bunch of always projects here in the local area that we're like designing. So that's a really fun way to spend a couple of months if you're a permaculture enthusiast. And we are actively right now looking for people who are interested in coming down to this community and co-creating longer immersive courses. We have a wonderful space for teaching, but my life as a father of 3 kids and a full-time designer, I don't really have the full time to do kind of like these longer courses, but I'm very interested in collaborating with people like Lindsay who might want to come down here and co-host courses. So that's anyone who's interested in any of those things, just hit me up.
Great stuff, guys. Thanks very much again. And all these podcasts are released on Substack, and you can go over and subscribe to this as well. Guys, that's been the Permaculture Vine podcast, episode 105, and I'll chat to you on the next one. Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.
And sorry for the technical problems and we messed up the live stream.